As Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin gear up for the highly anticipated summit in Alaska on Friday, saber-rattling over nuclear war is looming in the background as Trump spars with former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. Earlier this month, Trump positioning 2 U.S. nuclear submarines in response to, quote, highly provocative statements from the former president about Russia's nuclear capabilities. Trump announcing it on social media saying, quote, just in case these foolish and inflammatory statements are more than just that. Medvedev in a post on X warning, quote, each new ultimatum is a threat and a step towards war. 2 of the world's largest powers playing with innocent lives through social media jabs. You don't have to go back that far to remember the potential devastation. This month marks the 80th anniversary of the atomic bombing in Nagasaki, Japan, with thousands gathering last week to remember the day that left tens of thousands of innocent people dead. Nagasaki's mayor warning, quote, if we continue on this trajectory, we will end up thrusting ourselves into a nuclear war. Joining me now is Annie Jacobson, investigative journalist, New York Times bestselling author, and Pulitzer Prize finalist. Her most recent book is Nuclear War, A Scenario. Annie, thank you so much for joining me this evening. I just want to start with this. I found this book to be horrifying. This is legit. These are the notes. This is a horrifying book. Just lay out for us, how close are we? Those of us who are in Generation X, even older, we've been living with nuclear war so long, we forget how close we're on the line. How close are we right now, given the leadership in this world?
You know, we're always one button push away from nuclear annihilation. I think I make that really clear in the book. So you can't really measure how close we are in terms of rhetoric. But I think what I try to do is demonstrate that if that line is crossed, it's end game in 72 minutes.
One of the most disturbing things in this book that I was reading is just how quickly all of this occurs. I just want to play this out and read this section here. As in Washington, D.C., millions of people have been incinerated on the go, melted into streets and surfaces, sucked into hurricanes of fire. People have been impaled by flying shards and crushed under buildings everywhere. Human beings are screaming and burning and hemorrhaging to death. There is no scenario where large swaths of people survive nuclear war, is there? It's just massive death on a massive scale throughout the planet.
It is mass death, and thank you for reading that part of the book. You know, everything that I refer to is unfortunately not from Annie Jacobson's imagination. It's documented by the Defense Department, by what used to be called the Atomic Energy Commission. They're examining of what happens to people, places, and things after a nuclear bomb goes off. That's what the atmospheric tests were all about. And so, yes, it only ends one way, and that is in total nuclear annihilation. Every war game at the Pentagon, by the way, nuclear war game, shows that. It's why it's so dangerous when you have people like former Russian President Medvedev talking about nuclear threats.
And the speed at which the decisions have to be made is staggering and frightening. Once these missiles are launched, whether they were launched from North Korea or launched from Russia, it's only about 7 minutes before they could hit the continental United States. And we would have to depend on primarily Donald Trump to make the decision as to whether we'd respond?
You would depend upon whoever is president of the United States, and the same goes for Russia. I wanted to show how bad the problem is so that people who are in a position of affecting change can make those changes to come up with a solution. And I think you see the problem. It's not just horrific. It's literally, you know, civilization-ending problem, which is why I think knowing about how bad a nuclear war would be is really critical to understanding how important it is that people stop making threats, stop talking about using tactical nuclear weapons. This is absurd.
For most of us, the only thing that brought nuclear weapons back to mind was either Oppenheimer last summer or earlier this year watching Paradise on Hulu. And you see this world-ending scenario where a couple people manage to survive in a bunker, et cetera, et cetera. But what strikes me about that is Paradise seems to give us the impression that there would be large chunks of people who would survive. But from what I'm reading in your book, world temperatures would drop by 40 degrees, crops would be destroyed, lakes and oceans would either burn or freeze. There's not really a scenario of large groups of people surviving a nuclear attack, is there?
Well, that's right. And in Paradise, they do a different scenario. They have a different, I don't want to give it away, but they have a different impetus. And the result is sort of small, attacks with nuclear weapons. And so it is a different end game. But what I show is specifically how the Pentagon would deal with being attacked with nuclear weapons. And that's where everything becomes so all or nothing.
Yeah, one of the more interesting notes I saw in here is it said, even our defense mechanisms against nuclear weapons are essentially shooting a bullet at a bullet. The speed at which this would occur makes it very difficult. If you had an opportunity to sit and talk to Donald Trump or even Vladimir Putin before their meeting on Friday, what is the one takeaway you'd want them to have? What's the one thing you would want them to realize or think about based on what you learned in all these interviews and what you put together in this book?
That, nuclear war, nuclear weapons are insane, and the result of them is not something that you can ever come back from. I have hope toward this summit, believe it or not. I may be different than others.
Please,
but I
share
have,
it with us.
Well, after you write a book like I did and you spend all that time interviewing defense officials who advise the president, and you know the stakes and you are aware of what happens, I think as I demonstrate in the book, you have to be hopeful about this because the stakes are just simply too high. This is the first time that two world leaders who control 90% of the nuclear weapons on the planet, there are 12,000 nuclear weapons between 9 nuclear-armed nations. The U.S. and Russia control about 90% of them. Two men in one room. I have a hopeful feeling that they're going to talk about denuclearization, as the current president likes to call it.
Annie Jacobson, thank you so much for joining us this evening. This is a fantastic book. I tell everyone to check it out. I'll be right back with one more thing on The Beat.